April 1986. Two grizzled Libyans stood tense in a bombed-out, roofless apartment, their knuckles white as they clutched their battered radios. Their eyes darted upward, ears straining as they looked for threats. A piercing mechanical whine cut through the tension as a nearby SAM battery swiveled, its radar locking onto a phantom target. Missiles erupted from the launchers, streaking skyward in fiery trails. 50,000 feet above, two pilots in specialized pressure suits glanced at their instrument panel as warning signals blare. In any other aircraft, missile launch alerts like these would have sent chills down their spine. This, however, was no ordinary aircraft. This was the famous SR-71 Blackbird, a high-flying Cold War speed demon. Its pilot, Major Brian Shull, was perfectly willing to bet his and his co-pilots' lives on the plane's performance. Pitching the nose upward, he throttled the plane's two massive J-58 bleed bypass turbojet engines to the max, taking the aircraft to Mach 3.3, over 2,500 miles per hour. At this speed, the aircraft was pushing its very limit, covering a mile every 1.5 seconds and streaking across the sky faster than a speeding bullet. Nothing could catch the sled, as Shull and his reconnaissance systems officer, or RSO Major Walter Watson, called the Blackbird. Shull tried to idle the Blackbird's throttles just south of Sicily. Only the plane's airspeed indicator kept ticking higher and higher. Mach 3.8, Mach 3.9, Mach 4. Nobody had ever flown this fast in a production aircraft. Worried, the pilots tried to disengage the afterburners, to no effect. Then something strange happened, a sudden eerie silence. The engine stalled, electronics flickered. They found themselves coasting above the brilliant blue-green curve of the Earth, the atmosphere black around them. Then, without warning, the instruments sprung back to life, but the sky had changed. They'd somehow slipped through time, over the battle-scarred skies of Europe in 1944. Miles below lie endless formations of Luftwaffe fighters, flak bursts tearing through the clouds, the Allied forces on the brink of the Normandy invasion. Could this lone Blackbird, armed with nothing but speed and stealth, somehow shift the balance in the Allies' favor? Or will this marvel of Cold War technology merely become a ghost ahead of its time? Join us today to find out. Today, the SR-71 Blackbird still looks like an aircraft from the future, decades after its final flight. That's perhaps a testament to the visionary approach of its innovative engineer, Clarence Kelly Johnson, and his team at Lockheed's Skunk Works. Yet aeronautical engineers of the 1940s would not have found the technology used to design such a unique airframe foreign whatsoever. Johnson's team conceived of the project in the 1950s, using the same slide rules and drafting tables that he used to design Lockheed's P-38 Lightning. Coupled with next-generation jet technology and heat-resistant alloys, the results, however, were radically different. A high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance plane that could cruise at Mach 3 and fly at 85,000 feet, where it could easily overfly and outrun Soviet defenses. Its sleek, tapered body minimized its radar cross-section, an early application of stealth principles that would one day redefine aviation. Engineering the Blackbird took innovation, pluck, and truly unique systems. The SR-71's airframe could withstand the punishing heat generated by sustained speeds over 2,000 miles per hour, where skin temperatures reached over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Johnson's team invented ways to shape and weld titanium, a metal previously too brittle to handle such stress. They also engineered the Blackbird's unique engines, which were hybrids between traditional jet engines and ramjets. This revolutionary design enabled the aircraft to achieve extreme altitudes and speeds while maintaining remarkable stability. The result was a machine so advanced that it dominated the skies for over 3 decades, a testament to Johnson's vision of a plane that could vanish into the thin air it conquered. Shull and Watson didn't know what happened when the flickering lights on their instrument panels stabilized and the Blackbird's engines roared back to life. They saw the same familiar contours of southern France beneath them, but something felt off. A faint cackle hissed through the comms, subtle yet unnerving interference. Shull adjusted the dials, trying to re-establish contact with the control center, but instead of the familiar voices and call signs, a disembodied voice with a British accent spoke in an oddly antiquated tone. "Bandit on your 6, old chap. Looks like a 109. Shull couldn't believe his ears. A 109? Bandit on your 6? The next radio intercept confirmed his intrusive thoughts as he heard another distressed Brit yell, "My Spitfire's leaking fuel, I'm going down!" That was either an elaborate simulation, an incredibly accurate World War II reenactment, or the Blackbird had somehow pierced the time-space continuum as it accelerated past Mach 4. Banking the aircraft into a steep turn to get a better view below, what Shull saw confirmed his suspicion. Tiny dots, small prop-driven aircraft flying strange patterns, one of them descending into the clouds, billowing smoke and fire. The airframe shuddered as Shull gently throttled back, bringing the SR-71 down to just below Mach 1. A quick calculation ran through Watson's mind as he eyed their fuel gauges, just over 12,000 gallons at max capacity, but burning fast even at this reduced speed. Normally, they'd have multiple tankers waiting at predetermined rendezvous points every hour or so, but if this was really 1944, that tanker might not even be a blueprint in some engineer's mind yet. Shull knows they've got around an hour before they're running on fumes. They need to come up with a plan, and fast. Watson nods, glancing over the camera control system still dormant in front of him. If they really are back in time, maybe they could help shift the balance of the war. 1 or 2 passes could make all the difference. The intel would be invaluable. He powered up the high-resolution optical systems, calibrating the camera array for a lower altitude pass over enemy-occupied France. As they glide down, breaking through scattered clouds, they see dark plumes of smoke staining the landscape below. Towns and villages are scarred, blackened by the marks of conflict. It's a landscape dotted with convoy lines and huddled soldiers beneath makeshift camouflage nets. The SR-71 pilots knew they could provide Allied command with maps of entire military formations, fortifications, and supply lines. Intel years beyond the best they'd ever dreamed of, if they lived, of course. Their flight path took them north, and as they approached the coastline, a tense silence filled the cockpit. Shull tapped the fuel gauge, his mind racing with options. It dawned on both of them that theirs was a one-way trip. No tankers, no idea where they could land, and no thought of turning back. Then and there, Shull and Watson forged a new flight plan, one pass northeast from the French coast through Normandy, with a quick bank back to the northwest over Berlin. Then find an airfield somewhere across the channel and bring the Blackbird down safely enough to salvage the invaluable reconnaissance aboard. Both pilots knew they would probably never make it back to Beale Air Force Base in California, home of the Blackbirds in the United States. Even Royal Air Force Mildenhall, the Blackbird's overseas home in Suffolk, England, didn't accommodate the SR-71 until 1976. Even the best Allied reconnaissance planes during World War II, like the de Havilland Mosquito or Spitfire PR Mark 11, could not even sniff the technical parameters of the mission their SR-71 was about to undertake. Exponentially slower and unable to ascend beyond the reach of enemy fighters and flak batteries, World War II reconnaissance planes still excelled in one area: their high-quality vertical and oblique cameras. Equipped with lenses boasting focal lengths of up to 36 inches, these cameras captured intricate details across an impressive 15 square miles in a single shot. The SR-71's reconnaissance suite, by comparison, was designed to capture unparalleled detail across vast areas. The primary component was the optical bar camera, which could photograph an astonishing 100,000 square miles from the pilot's left horizon to his right horizon in a single pass, or in concrete terms, half of the entirety of France and almost 3/4 of Germany. The Blackbird's camera systems could produce such detailed imagery that its engineers could discern objects down to a foot in size from 85,000 feet up, ideal for mapping out troop movements, enemy infrastructure, and lines of communication. To put that into perspective, reconnaissance teams were known to have been able to make out the brand name on a pack of cigarettes lying flat on a picnic table from a photo taken at 80,000 feet. Additionally, the Blackbird was equipped with the technical objective cameras, designed to capture precise high-altitude images of specific target zones. It also had a side-looking radar, which allowed it to image terrain even through cloud cover. This added an all-weather dimension to its capabilities that World War II-era aircraft couldn't match. The Blackbird's belly housed 8 equipment bays, each packed with state-of-the-art cameras, sensors, and specialized electronics, a sophisticated array optimized for gathering electronic and signal intelligence. But in this unexpected low-tech World War II environment, much of its cutting-edge payload was rendered useless. Still, what would have taken Allied reconnaissance pilots and photo interpreters weeks to document, the SR-71 was about to do in a little less than an hour. Not a bad return on investment, even at a cool $200,000 per hour to operate. Shull and Watson stared out across France from their mirrored visors. They both knew what this was, a one-shot mission. The SR-71 Blackbird wasn't just another jet, it was a marvel of human engineering. A machine so specialized, so futuristic, that every part was carefully tuned for extreme speed, heat, and altitude. Just to cruise at Mach 3, its very fuel had to be reimagined from scratch. Standard Cold War jet fuel would have to be combusted into an inferno under these conditions, so Pratt & Whitney developed JP7, a fuel so resistant to ignition you could flick a match into it without causing an explosion. In fact, JP-7 was so stubbornly non-volatile that Lockheed had to develop a separate ignition system by injecting triethylborane just to start the engines. This volatile chemical ignited on contact with the air, producing a flash of green flame as it kick-started the fuel mixture. The SR-71 was a fire-breathing behemoth. As they throttled down to conserve fuel, the SR-71 began leaking through its frame, an inherent quirk of the Blackbird's design. On the ground and at lower speeds, the SR-71 literally couldn't hold its fuel. Its titanium skin was built to expand in the heat, sealing tight only when flying above 60,000 feet, where temperatures would fuse its metal skin tighter than any welding torch. As it cooled, gaps would reappear, letting JP-7 drip in eerie rivulets down the fuselage. And it wasn't just fuel. The SR-71's very bones were custom-built for the sky's harshest conditions. B.F. Goodrich had to develop special aluminum-reinforced tires to handle the immense weight of the jet, 170,000 pounds or 85 tons. These tires were designed to survive just 20 landings. After that, they were too worn to handle the SR-71's brutal descent. Then there was the gear Scholl and Watson wore. They needed specialized suits just to stay alive at these altitudes, where the atmosphere was so thin that bodily fluids could boil at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Adapted from NASA's Gemini spacesuits, the Blackbird's pressure suits kept their blood from boiling, allowed them to breathe, and offered a layer of protection if they lost cockpit pressure or had to eject. This was no simple flight suit, it was a cocoon against death itself. Here in 1944, if anything broke, fuel lines, ignition systems, pressurization gauges, they were stuck. The SR-71 was too advanced a masterpiece requiring technology, skill, and infrastructure that wouldn't exist for decades. No engineer in the world, Allied or Axis, could ever hope to replicate its intricate systems. Scholl and Watson could try to explain it all, if they lived. But how could they teach people from the past to build a machine from the future? It would be like explaining the Apollo 11 landings to Galileo Galilei. The stark truth was obvious: their fuel was finite, their mission singular. This was the SR-71's only shot over the skies of German-occupied Europe, and they had to make it count. Scholl guided the Blackbird in a sweeping arc over the Normandy coastline, just as the morning fog began to lift over the beaches. With Watson operating the cameras, they captured the entire sector in seconds. Next, they glided inland. The optical bar camera hummed as it mapped out intricate patterns of Axis formations, armored columns, and supply lines snaking across the French interior. Watson shifted their trajectory north, skimming past the fields of Paris and tracking along the Scheldt, where the German troops clustered around strategic bridges. They pressed on toward Berlin, the SR-71's cameras capturing every detail in breathtaking clarity. Individual tanks stood in precise formations, their steel hulls gleaming under the watchful gaze of Rommel himself. Scholl throttled back in a controlled turn, bringing their flight path into a slow, controlled descent over the English Channel. Normandy was little more than a thin line on the horizon. By the time they reached RAF Burtonwood, at the time Europe's largest airbase, fuel warnings were blaring and the runway appeared to be impossibly short from their altitude. Scholl lined up the approach best he could, forcing the Blackbird's speed down to its absolute limit. The wheels hit the ground, tires screeched and spat smoke as they burned against the asphalt. Scholl yanked the nose up as the safety chute deployed, using every ounce of the jet's reinforced tires to kill the forward momentum. But the momentum was relentless, and with a final jarring shudder, the SR-71 grinded off the end of the runway, its aluminum-reinforced tires kicking up gravel and grass as it came to a stop just feet from a farmer's hedgerow. Scholl and Watson climbed down, greeted by a mix of wide-eyed RAF personnel and Allied officers scrambling to make sense of this futuristic-looking bird that had just torn down their runway. Scholl quickly briefed them, identifying themselves as U.S. Air Force pilots from, quote, another time, instructing the stunned ground crew to gather the film canisters from the camera bays. Scholl stepped aside to speak to one man who seemed less shocked than the rest, a tall, sharp-eyed engineer in a Lockheed jacket. Scholl nodded. Kelly Johnson, I presume? Clarence Kelly Johnson, the inventor of the P-38 Lightning, stared at the SR-71 in awe, barely able to process the sleek black airframe. The processed images reveal a staggering level of detail. Tanks, artillery positions, camouflage depots, and Axis command centers, all glimmering like gems in the emulsion. Teams of photo interpreters back at HQ pored over the photographs, seeing for the first time every major Axis position and supply route laid bare. For Allied strategists, it was an unimaginable gift, a roadmap that would allow them to strike with precision, Within weeks, Eisenhower and his generals overhauled their strategy, rerouting forces to exploit the weakest points in the German defenses. The result was a series of surgical strikes that had shattered the Axis lines, forcing retreats faster than they could regroup. The veritable fog had been lifted from the battlefield. By Christmas, with no place left to hide, the German high command was brought to its knees. The SR-71 Blackbird, designed for a distant Cold War, may have had a single pass over the war-torn fields of Europe. Its cutting-edge technology might have been a one-trick pony in World War II, but the power it wielded to reveal secrets across entire countries in the blink of an eye would have been nothing less than revolutionary. What would you do if you piloted an SR-71 in World War II? Help the Allies alter key battles or stay hidden? Share your ideas in the comments. Now go check out What If a Single F-22 Time Traveled to Germany During World War II, or click on this video instead.